Hey YouTube, what's going on? It's Adam here with Retro Repairs and time for another quick repair video. What I have right here is a copy of Pokemon Ruby for the Game Boy Advance, and I'm going to show you how to replace the battery in it. First I'm going to show you what the symptoms of a dead battery are on this. So let's turn this on, and oops, let's try that again. There we go, booting into Game Boy. So unlike your standard or your older Game Boy Color or Game Boy, just standard Game Boy games, these don't rely on battery to maintain your save state. The batteries are just for an internal clock. So when I start the game, you're going to get something like this. You see that all right? Internal battery has run dry, the game can be played. However, clock-based events will no longer occur. So games like this, because you can do certain things at certain times of day, it uses the battery to maintain that clock. But if you look at the save state, come on, reflection. There we go. So as you can see, there's still badges in there, 73 minutes or maybe hours. 115 Pokemon, so quite clearly maintains a save. So let's crack this open and show you what to do. So first thing you're going to need is a small tri-wing screwdriver to open up the back of this. Now this particular cartridge I actually did some work on already. This was in my other video a couple videos ago, and I'll link it at the end of this video, but I ended up having to repair a trace because this would not boot up at all. So I did determine that the battery was also dead, so I've ordered a couple batteries and we're going to replace it. So first thing you're going to need to do is simply grab your soldering iron and a pair of tweezers and desolder this. So removing the battery is actually fairly easy. You just put a little bit of pressure upwards on the battery with your tweezers, put your soldering iron on the solder blob here, heat it up, and it should lift up nicely. There's actually not much solder on that. There we go. Just like so. Let it cool for a few seconds and let go. Now if you pay attention to the other side, you're going to do the same thing, but you need to be careful because there are some components nearby, such as capacitors or resistors, that you don't want to accidentally make contact with. There we go. So that's lifted straight up, and we'll put that off to the side. Next thing you want to do here, we're going to just clean up these pads a bit. So wipe off my soldering iron, and then I'm going to grab my desoldering braid. And all we're doing here, just holding the braid on it very gently, rubbing the soldering iron over top of it, the solder wicks right up into the braid. You don't want to push too hard, you're not scrubbing, you're just moving it. Just like so, and that pad's nice and clean now. Flipping to the other side, sometimes it is helpful to cut off the ends where you might have some built up extra solder. So where did I put my cutters? There we go. So just get a fresh piece, and then we're going to do the same thing. Oops, knocked them out. So once again, just being careful that you're not contacting any of the adjacent components. So since this is quite a bit of solder actually on that pad, we're going to trim that piece off and do this one more time. And that's pretty good. So put the soldering iron away, grab my isopropyl alcohol, and just give this a bit of a clean. What we're doing here with the alcohol, cleaning off any residual flux, as we want a nice clean surface to install the new battery on. Okay, so I've ordered some batteries. I ordered 10 of these, and you need a specific type of battery for this kind of cartridge. Let's see here. So Game Boy Advance, they use a CR1616, which are fairly small. There are larger ones, such as the CR2025 or CR2032, which are bigger. If you can physically fit it in the cartridge, you can use it. But again, it comes down to the size. Now, another thing to note here, let's just put it flat on here, and you can see that this tab is on the left. It's kind of floating there, so we need to bend this a little bit. So I'm gonna just grab my pliers right here, and I'm gonna kind of line this up the way that I think it's gonna need to go. Just like that. Yeah, I can bend it right at the end. So just gonna bend this down and then bend it out. That might be too much, but yeah, we can make it work. So that's kind of what I've ended up with here. This side here is also not really bent very much, so I'm gonna fix this by bending this here straight down. So we've got this going on here right now. It's just pointing straight down, and then bending it out a little bit further down along that. So this is what we've got right here. Got some nice tabs which will sit neatly just like so, with these tabs contacting the pads where you need it to. Perfect. So next step, you need to determine the correct polarity here. On the boards, there is a little symbol. See this minus right where my thumb is, and there's a plus right down here. So you need to line up the battery. On the back here, there's a plus on the back side of the battery. So that means this contact is positive, and it's going to go just like so. So, keeping that in mind, I like to put it just right beside here so that I got the correct order. And now, or the correct direction, sorry. Now what I'm going to do is begin soldering. So first thing I like to do, use a little bit of flux. It's kind of optional if you have good enough solder, but I just use a flux pen. Put a little flux on the pads. These help clean it up. It's a corrosive agent which eats away at any impurities in the top layer of the metal here. Really just prepares everything to be soldered neatly. I'm going to do the same thing for these tabs as well. My solder has flux in it. It is a flux core solder, but if you don't have flux core solder, you need to use, it's recommended to use flux. So next step here is add some flux to these pads. So you heat up the pad for a few seconds. Just drop a nice blob of solder there. I said flux earlier, but I meant solder. Just like so. Should be nice and shiny and round. And now, all you do, position the battery exactly how you're going to want it to be, making sure that the tabs are not shorting out somewhere they're not supposed to go. Then just heat up the solder, push down, wrap the solder around it like so. Leave it for a few seconds to dry or cool off, and then do the same thing on the other side. So push down on the battery, heat up the pad, just like so. Now, once again, using some 99% isopropyl alcohol if you can find it. If you can't, you can get away with less, maybe 90% or even 70%, but I wouldn't go any less than 70. But clean up any of the residual flux that gets left behind here. All right, so now that that's together, let's throw it into the case. Let's test it out, make sure she works. So, game in, It's coming. There we go. And booting in. So let's see what we've got here. Press start, and we don't get that warning about the clock. So new battery in there clearly is doing the trick. So now all that's left to do, we put the shell back on and screw it back together with that little tri-wing screw. But otherwise that's it. So a pretty easy fix. Doesn't take really a lot of soldering skill. You just got to be careful that you're not hitting other components and knocking other capacitors or resistors or anything like that off. So appreciate you watching the video. Hopefully you'll be able to use this and replace your own batteries. So thanks a lot for watching. Be sure to like the video, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I try and publish a new video at least once a week if I can, sometimes even more. So appreciate you watching, and we'll see you next time.